The best way to predict your future is to create it, not from the known, but from the unknown. Most of our thoughts and feelings come from our past experiences. They come from our memories. In fact, your brain is organized to reflect everything you know in your life. Your brain is a record of all the things you've learned and experienced to date. It's an artifact. And when you have an experience, when you're in the midst of an experience, all of your five senses plug you into the external environment. And as your brain is processing all of this vital sensory data, all of that information rushes back to the brain. When it reaches the brain, it causes jungles of neurons to organize themselves into networks, to string into patterns, to reflect their interaction with their external environment. The moment those neurons organize into the patterns, the brain makes a chemical. The chemical is called a feeling or emotion. And so experiences tend to create more long-term memories because it patterns or stamps or embosses networks of neurons into very specific patterns. And then the emotional quotient helps us to remember the event. So we learn something new intellectually, we also cause networks of neurons to form. I mean, the Nobel Prize laureate Kandel in the year 2000 found that when people learn just one bit of information, they doubled the number of connections in their brain from 1,300 connections to 2,600 connections. So if they didn't review that information or repeat it, the connections proved apart. So we know then that learning semantic information begins to organize circuitry in the brain, and experiences enrich the brain. The end product of experience, of course, is the emotion, and it causes us to feel certain ways. You can remember where you were on 9/11. You can tell me who you were with, what time of day it was, what you were doing, because whatever you were seeing in that moment or hearing in that moment changed how you were feeling. And the moment you felt altered or you felt differently, significantly, your brain perked up and you paid attention to whatever caused that. And that event in and of itself is called a memory. So then most of our thoughts and feelings tend to be within the neurocircuitry of the past and the emotions of the past chemically. So if you take a thought, thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body. And how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. So if you combine a thought and a feeling, a thought and a feeling, a thought and a feeling, and you have a series of good thoughts that are connected to a series of good feelings, that cycle of thinking and feeling creates what's called an attitude. If you have a series of negative thoughts that are connected to some pretty bad feelings, you'll say you have a pretty bad attitude today. So if how you think and how you feel creates a state of being, then attitudes are just shortened states of being. You feel good in the morning, you feel bad in the afternoon. If you take an attitude, an attitude, an attitude, and you begin to string attitudes together, when you combine an attitude, an attitude, an attitude, you start to form what's called beliefs. Now, belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over again until you hardwire it in your brain. And because beliefs are based on past experiences, then the very boundaries of our beliefs are how we feel. And so when our beliefs get challenged, it typically doesn't feel right. I know from the research that we've done that the redundancy of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking over time, for example, a person has an insecure thought, then they feel insecure. The moment they feel insecure, they think more insecure thoughts. They fire and wire more circuits in their brain to feel more chemicals of insecurity, and then once they're feeling insecure, they think more insecure thoughts, and they do this for over and over again. The redundancy and the repetition of that cycle over time conditions the body to subconsciously become the mind. Once the body becomes the mind, that's called a habit. It turns out that 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old are a set of habituations, unconscious thoughts, unconscious behaviors, unconscious emotional reactions that function like a subconscious computer program. So back to beliefs. An attitude, an attitude, an attitude are shortened states of being. And you combine them together then a belief, the cycle of thinking and feeling over time, creates a subconscious state of being. So all beliefs are subconscious states of being. We have beliefs about God, about spirituality, about health, about relationships, about love. And all of those are based on our past experiences, but the majority of those beliefs, we don't even know that we believe them because we think they're true, because they're not functioning primarily in the conscious mind. If you take a belief, and you stack them together, you start to form what's called perceptions. And perceptions have everything to do with the relationships we have, the things we create, the behaviors we demonstrate, the choices we make in our relationships. Why is that important? Because then if beliefs are subconscious states of being, and you're stringing beliefs together, then most people are viewing their life through the lens of the past, unconsciously. And they are filling in reality. They're seeing reality. They're filling it in from their past memory. You know this to be true because I did an amazing experiment where they took a group of people and they had them wear these lenses. And the lenses were divided in half. When they looked to one side, they saw one color. They looked to another side, they saw another color. And they said to them, okay, well, wear these glasses every day for 2 weeks. Take your kids to school, do all the things you do at work, shopping, work out, live your life. At the end of 2 weeks, they brought those people back into the lab and they said, look to the left, what color do you see? So we don't see a color. Look to the right, what color do you see? We don't see a color. Now, it says a couple things. Number one, the eyes don't see. The brain sees. But more emphatically important is that those people were filling in their external reality based on their memory in their brain. If they were truly seeing, they would be seeing those colors, right? So then, in our perceptions then, we are overlaying our future. We're overlaying the present moment with our memory of the past. And so then, that then begins to diminish possibility. And it begins to close down the way that we can begin to navigate and function in our lives. In order for us to change any belief or perception about ourselves and our lives, we have to make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that's greater than the hardwired programs in the brain and the emotional condition of the mind. And the body has to respond to the mind. In other words, the choice becomes an experience that the person never forgets because the internal experience begins to reorganize the circuitry in their brain and send a new emotional signature in their body. And in that moment, the person is becoming liberated from the past. How can the preacher in the deep south of the United States move into a state of religious faith and drink strychnine and have no biological effects? Or the mother whose child is trapped under the car, who lifts up the car and pulls the child out. The mother doesn't say, geez, I didn't work out in 2 weeks, or God, I ate carbohydrates yesterday. She's not in any polarized state. She moves into a state of absolute certainty, and it's energy that lifts that car up, because energy is the phenomenon of matter. And when she makes that change internally, her body is literally responding to the mind. So then in order for us to change our beliefs about spirituality, about money, about God, about relationships, we have to come out of our resting state. The experience inwardly has to be transcendent or greater than any past experience. And that's when biology begins to change. Now, going from that old self to the new self is the biological, the neurological, the chemical, the hormonal, the genetic death of the old self. And most people, they step out into that unknown and it feels so uncomfortable, they can't predict it, they return back to the known. People say to me, well, I can't predict my future. And I always say to them, well, the best way to predict your future is to create it, not from the known, but from the unknown. And that void, that unknown, is the perfect place to create from. Now, why is this dangerous? Because when you're living in survival 70% of the time, there's better chances in survival from running from the unknown than embracing the unknown, right? If there's a predator out there, you hear something around the corner and you can't see it, that's an unknown. You're going to run. You're not going to go, and it's not a time to trust. It's not a time to open your heart. It's not a time to communicate. Here, kitty, kitty. It's not a time to do that. It's time to run. You'll never trust the unknown in that state. So if people are living by these emotional states of survival, they're never going to want to step out into the unknown because they can't predict the future. they'd rather hold on to what they have. Turns out that those emotions of stress are highly addictive. They give us a rush of adrenaline, rush of energy. And so people use the problems and conditions in their lives to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion so they can remember who they are as a somebody. So then, if your thoughts can turn on the stress response, and those stress chemicals are addictive, then we become addicted to our own thoughts. So then stepping out into that unknown is where the true greatness happens, because that's where a person begins to say, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? What behaviors will I want to demonstrate in my new life? Can I rehearse them in my mind? And the mere process of mental rehearsal, this is neuroscience now, begins to install the circuits in your brain to look like the experience has already occurred. You're priming your brain into the map of the future instead of the record of the past. And then the true person who's in the process of transformation will say, can I teach my body emotion what that future is going to be like? Can I begin to embrace the joy of my new life? And the body is the unconscious mind begins to believe it's in the future instead of in the past. Now, that process is not an overnight process. We don't jump from the old self to the new self. It requires that continuous process of changing our biology. But I can tell you, in observing people who have healed themselves of very serious health conditions, who've healed themselves of some pretty difficult scars in the past, who've overcome addictions, who've created new opportunities and new jobs and new relationships,